Let me tell you a quick story. There once was a group of 20 gangs, nations, including the United States, France, United Kingdom, Japan, and Germany, that came together to form the G20 mob. They grew in influence and power in their areas of expertise: military might, religion, technology, commodities. They set out to expand to new turf and dominate resources in other countries in order to continue to expand their empires. This mob's alliance formed a superpower, known for their influence, power, and commitment to maintaining the status quo. Some of their means of intimidation were sections, embargoes, and tariffs. Later, other gangs, nations, began to grow economically. They thought to themselves, we can do what they do better, we can also expand. Instead of intimidation, we will build infrastructure in these new territories to enlarge our empire. These 5 gangs, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, came together to form the BRICS mob, known for their resilience and resourcefulness. They knew that the G20 mob dominated the world's trade routes through their currency, the petrodollar. So it was obvious they needed to develop their own currency in order to rival the G20 mob. Thanks to their innovative tactics and their ability to leverage their resources, they were able to gain some ground. But however, the G20 mob was not willing to give up their powerful grip so easily. They had a vast network of allies and informants that they were not afraid to use to their advantage. One day it came to a head, and the fight for world dominance had begun. Each side suited up for battle. G20 called on the backing of its allies with their powerful military might, and BRICS called for new allies, finding its strength in numbers. World War III had begun. Which nations will side with who? BRICS is an acronym for the 5 major emerging economies of Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. These countries are characterized by their large populations, fast-growing economies, and a commitment to developing their infrastructure. BRICS countries have become increasingly important in the global economy and are seen as a potential counterweight to the traditional Western powers, NATO or G20. BRICS aims to help protect developing country rights to fair global trade and from the perils of political ideology. With Brazil being the largest country in South America, it is known for its vibrant culture and natural beauty. Russia is the largest country in the world and has a long history of political and economic influence. India is the second most populous country in the world and is home to a diverse range of cultures and one of the greatest producers of natural gas. China is the most populous country in the world and has become an economic powerhouse. South Africa is the most industrialized country in Africa and a mecca of natural resources. Clearly, they are going for strength in numbers. Our BRICS countries have become increasingly important in the global economy and are seen as a potential hedge against the traditional Western powers that seek to control foreign economies through dollar dominance. The current system is dominated by the US dollar, which accounts for about 90% of all currency trading and nearly 100% of oil trading. Many new nations have applied to join the BRICS organization, giving it a new acronym, BRICS+. Some of them hold major trade commodities like Saudi Arabia, which is the largest crude oil producer. On January 1st, 2024, the UAE, Iran, and Egypt, along with Ethiopia and Argentina, which have major agricultural resources, are jumping on the bandwagon because they sense an opportunity to build an alternative alliance to Western-led globalization, the New World Order. These nations seek to take advantage of the dollar decline and economic weaknesses being exposed by the quick collapse of the Western sanctions against Russia and many other nations. BRICS is planning to launch a new development bank and currency that rivals the US dollar dominance and World Bank. With these new countries joining BRICS, they would increase their collective GDP to more than 33%, giving them a significant influence, infrastructure, and dominance. In 1933, President Franklin D. Roosevelt abandoned the gold standard to stimulate the economy. This allowed the Federal Reserves to print as many dollars as they needed. Then, in 1971, President Richard Nixon completely severed the link between the dollar and gold. Currently, there isn't any currency backed by the gold standard because gold is a slow-moving asset and is deflationary. Instead, our currency is backed by oil, creating the petrodollar. However, BRICS has been stocking its banks with gold for a while now, in their new development bank located in Shanghai, China. If BRICS backs its currency by gold, it would bankrupt the world. They have been very strategic in their current plans. BRICS is still undecided on what the global standardized currency would be. India's president proposed that we should trade in each other's currency, but the problem with this is that the more economically valuable currency would be the most preferred means of exchange. This would result in almost half of the world's population trading in Chinese yuan. If BRICS plans to back its currency by the gold standard, it would give it a greater value than the US dollar. But they are not the first to try to separate themselves from the dollar standard and back its currency by gold. This reminds me of what former Libyan President Muammar Gaddafi was trying to do when creating a global African gold-backed currency that would be used for global trade. Because Africa is the highest producer of gold in the world, this would have been a checkmate, enabling them to be able to pay off debts to the West and back their resources with real money gold. They quickly got rid of him before his influence spread too far. But BRICS is way more subtle in its approach by calling it a non-inflationary currency. They also plan to launch another form of currency, a digital currency, cryptocurrency. On April 1st, Russia launched ruble pilots. But the issue with this is the mistrust and understanding of cryptocurrencies. Also, this would make it that much easier to control and regulate every transaction. I think they would probably go with a gold-backed digital currency, proof of stake or proof of work, I'm not sure. If BRICS decides on a global trade currency and rejects the US dollar, we could be looking at another depression with very high inflation as billions of dollars come back to the US. With China investing heavily in international industrial infrastructure and building 5 times more than the US around the world, many countries are seeing an opportunity to separate themselves from the declining dollar. Places like the Caribbean and Africa find it more advantageous and more respectable to do business with China. However, China may be a better trading partner, I would be very wary of the motives of all these loans and large infrastructure that they are building. I believe if this is not done with mutual respect and equality, these nations could fall into the same trap of economical servitude they were trying to avoid. They see a weakness that they can exploit to enlarge their economies. Those that refuse to do for themselves will fall prey to the will of others. Some of the major issues that stifle the growth of BRICS is the fact that they are not united as they seem. Some of the nations have unsettled political disputes with each other. Like India and China, border territory issues. Many of these countries' economies depend on Western trade agreements, and they don't want to risk sanctions from NAFTA or free trade agreements. BRICS has been criticized for its incapacity to live up to the promises that they declared during previous summits. The dominance of the Chinese economy and its role in trade relations makes BRICS much more a China with partners group than a union of equal members. BRICS countries lack mutual political and economic interests. During the 15th summit in South Africa, President Cyril Ramaphosa was faced with the hard decision to arrest President Putin if he stepped foot in South Africa to attend the summit due to war crimes and human rights violations. During the summit, they accepted 6 new nations into BRICS, so we will just call this the bloc now. Anyway, with these countries, the bloc would account for more than 40% of the world's population. If these countries use another currency, we would be forced to trade in that currency as well, because the Western countries like Europe and the US don't really produce much of their own commodities. If the dollar loses its dominance, that would put severe strain on international trade with other countries that we rely on for our daily resources like gas, oil, natural resources, and technology. Can you say superinflation? The dollar will continue to decline. The West feeling the pressure. Years ago, the US thought the BRICS alliance was a joke, but now they are taking this threat to their global system very seriously. In November 2022, the US started an act of war by blowing up the Nord Stream oil pipelines that goes from Russia to Europe, but of course they say they didn't do it. Perhaps they think war will stifle these economic changes, or maybe they plan to offset this with their own United States Central Bank digital currency, CBDC. I think this could be a horrible decision for the US as it evens the playing field to an extent that puts them at a disadvantage. What we could do to offset these economic changes: invest in commodities like gold and silver, exchange-traded funds, ETFs, diversify currency exposure by investing in assets denominated in currencies other than the US dollar, such as BRICS market indexes. Consider alternative investments such as real estate or private equity in the BRICS countries.